Hi there, welcome back to Stationeers. Okay, first things first, me and my wife are not very well, so if my voice sounds a little bit odd, I apologise. I'll try not to sniff, and I will also try and mute myself when I'm coughing. But hopefully we can get through this. I should probably be resting, but with the update looming, I don't want to hold off the tutorial much further. I want to make sure that I get at least the greenhouse bit of it done. So here we are. So, in part one, we got our water set up. So we got an ice crusher piped into our water bottle filler so we can drink, going into a tank which is being used to store a little bit of additional water. And then we got our hydroponic tray set up as well. And as you can see, we've got water set at a decent temperature, and we're kind of good to go on that front. We also have our nitrogen being stored. We will use this at a later point, but we're not going to worry about it right now. And that was all part one. Part two is probably going to be the biggest of the parts. We're going to be touching on atmospherics, but there is a lot to this part. I was going to split it down, but I just think it's all the same thing, and if we try and go through it as clearly as possible, then hopefully it'll make some sense. Disclaimer, there are multiple ways to deal with a problem or a solution in Stationeers. What I'm going to show you is not the only way of doing it, it's just what I'm doing. I have no doubt people will tell me, oh, you should do this or you should do that, or somebody might come up and give you a tip in the comments. Obviously, they're all valid, so just take what I say with a pinch of salt. I'm going to give you the almost bare minimum information you need. But we're going to kind of touch on three things today. We're going to touch on atmospherics, which is all about like your gas and your pressure and your temperature. There's going to be a slight touch on phase change. Don't let that term scare you. The bit we're going to do is very easy, and I'll go through it as carefully as I can. I'll be honest, I don't 100% understand it myself, but I know enough to do what we need to do. And then the third thing we're going to do is we're going to touch on, in a very small capacity, a little bit of IC coding, because I could show you what we're going to do in circuits, but I've already showed you the circuits via the solar panel, so you understand how they work. Go off and have a play with those yourself, figure out how they work. We're going to now touch on a bit of IC, because that's where I like to think that I'm doing all right with IC. I know quite a lot about it. Not an expert by any means. Go find someone else if you want an expert, but I know enough to get by. Definitely. So, before we can even start thinking about what we need in this room, we need to just kind of decide or know what we're going to grow. So, on easy difficulty, you start with potato, soybeans, and wheat. Now, wheat is going to give you your better food, but we're going to also grow potatoes as well. So, we're going to grow both of these items. The soybeans, don't worry too much about them for now. They're just, yeah, I mean, they're fine. You mix them with other food types to make better food, but we don't care. We're going to make potatoes, and we're going to make cereal bars. But, obviously, you plant a seed, it needs to grow. So, go into your Stationpedia and search for the item. So, we're going to search for potato. And click on the potato. Now, in here, there is a lot of information about what the potato requires or what it will do. There's a lot here. You don't need to worry about all of it. The three things I would worry about is the inhaled gases. That's what it requires. I would look at the ideal temperature range, and I would look at the ideal pressure range. The light you're going to also need to concern, but not today. We're going to look at that later. Right now, we're just doing atmospherics. So we can see that it inhales carbon dioxide, or CO2, at 8.64 moles per hour. Don't worry too much about this. Basically, because it's only listing CO2 and nothing else, then all we need in this room is CO2. Right? Step 1. Step 2 and 3 is your temperature and your pressure. Temperature, 20 degrees to 30 degrees. That will be slightly easier to manage later down the line. We'll worry about that later. But the pressure, we want minimum of 50 kPa. Now, I'm going to screw this up. Someone's going to tell me different. But basically, pressure is not the same as moles. Pressure is the pressure. It's how condensed those moles are. Moles, the way I look at it, is the amount of that gas or liquid that you have. So pressure is how condensed it is. Moles is the amount you've got. That's how I like to look at it. Could be completely wrong, but you know what works for me? I'm still alive. I'm still getting on with things. So don't worry that this is saying 8.64 moles per hour. Basically, all we need is CO2 and a minimum pressure of 50 kPa. Okay, that, and just look at that and you will be fine. You don't need to worry about this. So if we go and have a look outside and make sure you've got your atmospheric analyzer in your tablet, let's go and see what Mars is made of. I'm going to replace the battery in my tablet. We'll just, no, haven't I got a battery charger somewhere? I do, but there's no batteries in it. That's fine, we'll take this one. Right, the storm is still going, so actually I don't want to go outside yet. That's a shame. Yeah, this is why I should have an airlock, really. But whilst we're waiting, let's start printing out a few bits, shall we? So, we're gonna, basically, what I'm gonna show you is that Mars has CO2 in its atmosphere. So we're gonna want to collect that. And when we collect it, we're gonna need to store it somewhere. So we're gonna need to get a tank. We don't have to use a tank, but I just like using it because it allows you to store quite a lot. And we're gonna want an insulated tank because we're gonna put this tank outside because it's big and bulky. We don't want to A, clog up our greenhouse, but B, insulate it because we don't want Mars temperature to interfere with, excuse me, to interfere with it. So get yourself a single tank, and then we'll put that up outside. You're also going to need, after that, let's go for an active vent. We'll get one of those printed. Almost done. Okay. And then after the active vent, we're also going to need some insulated pipes. To print yourself out a good whack of these. I'm going to go for 10 for now. I haven't got any more. And we'll just wait for them. Excuse me. Right, so we've got you. Got the tank. Got those. 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, that's the bare minimum that we're going to need to collect atmosphere. But I'm also going to tell you to print out some other stuff as well, and we'll go through why later. Make yourself a drain. Okay, you want the kit liquid drain. Now, yes, we're going to be handling gas. We're going to be pulling gas in. But I'll explain to you why we need this drain later. We're going to go through it all. So once we've got that, you're probably going to want to get yourself plenty of cable as well. So get some copper. I've already got some in my electronics printer. And get yourself some cable printed. Once we've got a fair amount of cable, we're also going to need a sensor. Which I haven't got, so I'll print that out. And I'm also going to print out some frames. Now, I don't think I've got any steel, so instead what we're going to do is we're going to put the tank on the roof. Or try to, because all my solar panels are up there. But we'll see, we'll see. Let me print out 2 more. Okay. Storm is finished, so we can open our door. Remember that if you don't wait and you open the door and it's not an airlock, all your stuff would blow away. Or it would take damage. So always important to wait it out if you haven't got an airlock. Okay, so our greenhouse is here. So the first thing I'm going to want to do, get my tank, shove my tank down. So I'm just going to put it, I'll just put it here for now. That's fine. It's as good a place as any. Before we do anything else, get your tablet. and have a look. So you can see that Mars is comprised of 1.5% of oxygen, almost 3% nitrogen, 95% CO2, and less than 1% of pollutant. Now, in a high pressure, that mix, apart from the pollutant, is perfect for a greenhouse. You've got a large amount of CO2. The potatoes are going to take that in. The nitrogen and the oxygen will not harm your crops. They won't harm your potatoes. And you're going to have oxygen in there for you to be able to breathe. The pollutant is really easy to deal with. So all we need to do is we need to just collect this in a large quantity. So the easiest way of doing that is to get a vent and just pump it in. So I'm going to get a vent here. Let's bring it down a little bit. We're going to get some insulated pipes. Excuse me. We're going to connect those pipes to the tank. And I'm going to get some of my cables. And we've got our cable here that we connected our water bottle filler up to. So we're going to just run this cable all the way along and connect to that, because we know that's the same network that we want to be on. That is our greenhouse cable. Okay, the last thing to do, get the liquid drain. Okay, put it on your pipe, and if you scroll, you're looking for this one where it's it connects to the pipe and it has what looks like a little hole on one side of it. Put that down and it should look like this. On your active vent, the blue switch, press it so it goes red, and it says set outward, because that wording is what that switch will do if you press it. So if it says set outward, it means it's set inward, just to confuse you. And then turn the vent on. Okay, do this during the day. At 6 degrees, we're fine with that. We can deal with 6 degrees. Let me explain what's going to happen here. Well, it's pretty obvious. As you can see by the little white lines, the vent is sucking in Mars atmosphere and is storing it in this tank. So you can see there we've currently got 140 kPa of Mars, and the ratios are the same. Our CO2 dropped a little bit, but that's because I'm using my jetpack here, so it's sucking in some of my jetpack stuff in. And obviously we've got a little bit of pollutant, and you can see that the moles of each gas are going up. So that's all happening just from the vent. The vent just sucks it in because we've got it set to inward. If I set it to outward, it would push it out and empty the tank. Not what we want. The active vent, this smaller version of the active vent has a built-in safety. So if you search for active vent in here and go into it, there is a pressure internal setting, and that is the pressure. So that setting is the pressure of the pipe inside the vent. By default, the active vent is set to a pressure of 50 megapascal. Our tank and pipe network can handle 60 megapascal, which means the vent will not suck in and the system will not explode, assuming that we only have gas in there. This is where phase change comes in, and I'm aware that I'm throwing probably quite a lot of information, so I'm sorry, but at the moment we're just sucking in Mars, obviously, and we're just storing it. Fine. And if we look at a tablet, you can see that we've just got those 4 gases in there. But you need to be aware of pollutant. It's an important aspect of what we're doing here. If you search for pollutant, and this is going to potentially bewilder you, but please just bear with me. I promise it isn't as hard as it seems. So, search for pollutant and scroll down and you will see this graph, okay? I hate looking at this, I really do. But it's kind of needed for what we're going to do. Tick the use Celsius button, and that will obviously change the value so it makes a bit more sense. And obviously we have this graph. So what this graph is telling you is what state pollutant will be in at a certain temperature and a certain pressure. So up on the left hand side we've got the pressure, and down at the bottom, going left to right, we've got the temperature. Now this large portion here is where it remains gas. This box here, pollutant will turn into ice. This box here, pollutant will become a liquid. Before I carry on, I'm going to turn my vent off because I've just noticed that down here, the temperature is going down on Mars, and I want to pour the gas in as hot as possible. So we're not going to worry about that anymore until the next day. But let me pause this anyway. So you've got this black line that kind of represents the change in states. So if you look at the bottom, as I move my cursor around, wherever this cross meets or wherever my cursor is, these figures at the bottom are changing. So here, for example, at 35 degrees and a pressure of 3820 kPa, so that is almost 4 megapascal, is on the borderline of where pollutant will change between liquid and gas. So if we go up, so if I move my cursor up here, that is representing a pressure increase. So if the pressure was to go higher than the 3837 as it currently is now, or 3803 now, the pollutant will change into a liquid. That is what's going to happen, assuming the pollutant is 31 degrees. Now, if we go back to our potato for a second, in an ideal world, where's our temperature? Oh yeah, so look, 20 to 30 degrees. Okay. Now the idea is going to be we don't put pollutant in the greenhouse, but if we can warm up our tank outside, we can get it to a nice temperature, so when we pump it in, it's absolutely fine. But yeah, so let's just, as an example, in the middle of those, 25 degrees Celsius. So back to pollutant. So if I move my cursor until the temperature is 25 degrees, which is about there, what that's telling me is that if, oh, I've moved my mouse. I can't, my fingers are too big. No. Okay, we'll go 24 and I won't touch the mouse. So at 24 degrees, if our pressure goes above 3636, our pollutant will start to liquefy. Any pressure below that, and it will remain gas. Now that's kind of okay, because if we decided, oh, actually, I don't want 3 megapascals of gas from Mars in a tank, I'm going to be fine, and absolutely fine. But what happens if that tank accidentally goes above? Our active vent is going to pressurize it up to 50 megapascal. Now, don't get me wrong, that's overkill. I would never recommend you putting your tank up to 50 megapascal. There's no need. But if you did, you would be above the pressure threshold, and so that pollutant will turn to liquid. When that happens, it will cause your pipe network to start to stress, and it will pop, it will break, and you will lose whatever you've collected. Now, if you look at the moment, Mars is 5 degrees Celsius. If we bring this down here, 5 degrees, a pressure of 3340 or above will cause it to liquefy. Now, I'm going to do it just to show you what happens. But it's probably going to take a couple of in-game days because obviously our tank is pretty large. It's got a large volume, so it'll take a while for it to get to 3 megapascal. So at some point I'll show you. But right now, all you need to look at is, at the moment, the pollutant is in there. You know what? Screw it. Let's turn this on. Let's turn it on. Now this is going to be cold. It's going to be coming in at 4 degrees. You can see the temperature in there coming down because we're mixing colder Mars with the tank. Once that hits whatever we said, so 3340, probably less because it's getting colder out here, the pollutant will liquefy. That is why we put that liquid drain on. Any liquid that exists in this network will be output by this drain passively. Not an instant thing, it takes time for it to release, but it will help avoid your pipe networks from breaching. So I highly recommend that, in all honesty, putting one of those on any pipe network that shouldn't have liquid will potentially save your base. It doesn't have to be something as simple as this. It could be a really complex system. And if you don't expect liquid to ever exist in there, then slap a drain on and stick that drain outside somewhere. There will be instances when you want liquid in. We're not going to cover that. And obviously in those instances, you wouldn't use the drain because you'll lose your liquid and you're probably using it for something. But as we're currently standing here, we don't want liquid in this network. All we want is CO2, the nitrogen, the oxygen. What this is going to do, though, is as we pressurize that tank and the pressure of the pollutant increases to the point where it does start to liquefy, we effectively are filtering out that pollutant. The pollutant will disappear and we will be left with the CO2, the oxygen, and the nitrogen, because the pollutant will convert into liquid and be exhaled via the drain. And that's all phase change is. Phase change is the term used for when a element, so oxygen or pollutant in this case, changes between gas, solid, and a liquid state. That's what phase change is. During that process, there are pros and cons to doing it. So, like, if a gas was to condense, it would get hotter, and if it was to evaporate, it would get cooler. I'm not going into it. That's not what this is about. On the next day, I'll probably be able to show you this. But right now, we have a tank of what is going to be just pure greenhouse gas. What I want to do is I want to bring this pipe down. So let me do this, because we want this in our greenhouse. Obviously in a controlled manner, which we're going to sort out. But that's what we want. And remember, by adding more pipes, you are increasing the volume and so decreasing the pressure. So again, like we've gone through it before, you've got your pressure here. The moles of each gas is how condensed it is. That's how much nitrogen I've got. The pressure is how condensed those moles are. The lower the pressure, the less condensed they are. So the more room they've got to move around or whatever else they do. I don't really know. The more pressure you put in there, the less wiggle room they've got until eventually there'll be an explosion or a breach or whatever. But anyway, long story short, we've got a vent, we've got a tank. So we now need to build a system that will pull that into the greenhouse. So if we go inside my greenhouse, we have our pipe there. Now, if I wanted to, I could connect that to a passive vent, and that tank would just equalize with this room. The room would become part of the tank. Obviously, we aren't going to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a system that will slowly leak the CO2 in when the when the pressure in this room drops below a certain pressure. So if we look at potatoes, the minimum grow pressure is 25, but the ideal is 50. So we want 50 kPa of pressure in this room. And that 50 kPa doesn't have to be CO2. It doesn't have to be a pure CO2. I could leak my tank in here, my oxygen tank, and get the pressure up in here. And we probably will do that. But right now, we need to set this up. So in order to create a system that's going to do that for us, we first need to know what the room currently is. So we're going to need that sensor that we spoke about. Go to your electronics printer and print yourself a sensor. Make sure you've got a fair few cables to handle because you're going to need them. And we'll just get that going for a little while. So what's going to happen is the sensor will be used to read what we have in the room, and then based on those values, that will determine whether we turn on a pump, whether we turn off a pump, that kind of thing. Now, again, I'm gonna continue to say this. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So I'm gonna go down the pump method. Some people might say, don't do a pump, do a digital valve. Other people might say, no, do an active vent. There's a million different ways, and there's a million different reasons as to why you would do each one. I'm just showing you my concept, just to understand the function, and then change it later, improve upon it if you want to. Absolutely fine, but just understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then once you've got that understanding, then work on making it better. So I've got my pump, and I've got plenty of cables. Now what we're going to need is a passive vent, and we're going to do a few passive vents because we're going to create a whole ventilation system. So grab yourself 4 passive vents. There we go. And then you should have loads of spare pipe from when you started. That probably isn't going to be enough, so I will just get some more pipe printed. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is over to my electronics printer. We're going to craft a couple of things that we haven't touched on yet. Search for housing. You're going to need some solder. Some copper. And some steel. Oh, do I have steel? Do I have enough steel? I do have enough steel. Put me one more to get rid of the 0.5. And then give me my steel. So some people are probably going to have the opinion that you do not need to be going this advanced with a greenhouse. There's probably other ways of doing this. We could use logic circuits. But I am so used to doing this that it's become like it's pretty easy to set up. When I'm not trying to explain it to people, like I try to explain this to my wife, she like goes straight over her head. Or at least it used to. She's actually getting used to it now. But I'm going to show you how I do it because I think if you can pick up IC coding, if you could pick up this MIPS language that they use in Stationeers, you are going to be well ahead of the game later down the line because it opens up so many possibilities. Once you've got the housing, print yourself out a circuit. And you should... Oh, I don't have enough electrum. Oh, I do have enough electrum. Ignore me. But yeah, some people are probably going to say, "Whoa, this is advanced. You shouldn't be touching on this." But I do agree. But at the same time, this is the direction that you will eventually go in anyway. So let's show you this at the start. If you don't like it, then you just mirror what we're doing with those logic circuits that I've showed you before. But right now, I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to do. And you can copy this letter for letter if you want to. Print yourself out a computer. I'm going to put that circuit in there for now. And then after the computer, if you search for motherboard, you want an IC editor motherboard. Now, like I said, we're going to touch on the coding. If you've not seen the coding before, I did a tutorial where I went through some of the basics with my wife. I'm not the best teacher, but go and have a look at that video and hopefully it will give you kind of like an entry into the world of IC. I promise it's... Oh no, you know what? It was a bit confusing when I first looked at it. I remember it was about... Oh, it was over 2 years ago now when I first looked at this. And I ended up going on a live stream and getting the community to help me as I learned. And since then, I've just been using IC for almost everything. And I do not look back. So, we have our pipe. Get your gas sensor. So, if you scroll, you'll see gas sensor. And then place it somewhere on the wall. I'm going to place it over here. And then hook that up to power. Or get it onto the same network as your greenhouse. Next, you've got all your passive vents. So you want to create a ventilation system. So I'm going to just space my vents out across the entire room. For the sake of being symmetrical, we're going to do it like that. Connect all of those vents together. Okay. This is a bit overkill. You could do a single vent if you wanted to, but this will allow you to circulate the entire room as opposed to a single section of the room. Now connect that pipe network to your pipe coming from your CO2 tank. Leave a gap of 1 pipe. Get your volume pump and place it in that gap, and the arrow should be going away from the input, so it's coming in from the tank and out to your greenhouse room. It should be in this orientation. Now get that pump connected to power. There we go. Got yellow on both sides, so I know that's connected. Set the pump to be like 1 litre for now. We'll test how fast that needs to be later. You've got the bare essentials done. Okay, you've got your sensor, which we'll use to read the room. So whatever you see on your tablet is what that sensor will see. You've got the pump, which will turn on and will pump gas into the room. You've got the vent, which will allow the gas in the room to equalize with that pipe network. So if I have a look at the pipe, you'll see that we've got whatever's in the greenhouse in there. We've got that little bit of pollutant. We're not too concerned about that right now. It's such a small mini amount. It's irrelevant. What we now need to do is we need to set this system up so that when the pressure in this room is below, and we're going to go random. Let's go for like 52 kPa, because the potatoes, remember, they want a minimum pressure, ideal pressure of 50. They will grow above 25, but they'll be slow. As long as we can keep it above 50 kPa, we're golden. So we're going to set that to like 52. So this is where your computer comes in. Stick the computer anywhere. So I'm going to put it in this far corner, just so it's kind of out the way of everything else. And this too, you've got the computer modem. If you scroll, you've got the computer retro. The computer retro you could put into the wall, and it uses less space. So I'd suggest using that one. Get your screwdriver and complete the computer. And then get that connected to your network via both the power port and the logic port. There we go. That's all connected. If I turn it on, it's flashing an error. The reason it's flashing an error is because the computer requires a motherboard. So the motherboard that you printed, put it into that slot, close the door, and to get rid of the error, just turn it off and on again. Oh no, that didn't work. Why are you not a worky? I don't know why that's erroring. Oh, yes I do. Because we've only got half the bloody pieces to put together. So, what time of day is it outside? Oh, it's daytime. Right, don't forget, when the day comes, go and turn that vent back on. Because you want to be trying to capture Mars at its warmest temperatures. Currently we're at 2 degrees. That's going to get warmer. Not much warmer, but warmer. So, turn your vent on, because we're going to capture this. So you can see we're currently on 1.41 megapascal. If I remember, I'll come back out and sort that out. I probably won't, so we'll see what happens. So the computer is flashing an error because it wants to connect to a device and we haven't got that device. So get your IC housing that you printed and just put it somewhere. So we're going to put it here next to the computer. This IC housing will go through shortly, but it has a power port at the top and a data port at the bottom. Connect both of those to the network. Depending on when you're watching this, if you're watching it after the update's gone live, there is a variant of the housing which only has a single port. You won't have two that you have to connect to it. There we go. The error's gone. Turn it off and on again. It's connected to the IC housing. If you had multiple housings, you could use this drop down and you could select the housing that you want to connect to. My air tank is low, so let me sort that out. Air tank is now critical, so I better pick that up. And let's look in here. So that's the pipe that's outside, and I can point to it because it's in here. And you can see we're at 1.89 megapascal. So it's getting higher. So the IC housing is used in conjunction with a circuit. You place a circuit in there, and that circuit contains your code. And your code can run and interact with any devices that have a logic port. So it can connect to a door, it can connect to a pump, it can connect to the ice crusher. Anything that has the logic port, it can turn it on automatically. It can read data from the sensor, it can do all that kind of thing. And that's what we're going to do. The pins here, you have 6 pins. Annoyingly, because of where I put it, I can't get to those pins. That's actually really annoying. I am going to move the computer, because that's just going to irritate me. There are little quirky bits like that in the game. You just have to kind of shrug it off and just carry on. I'm going to put it here. It's going to be sticking outside, but it's fine. I'm not bothered about that. Let me get you reconnected. Like so. And get you finalized. Get the motherboard. Put it back in. We're exactly back where we were, but now I can get to these pins. The pins are used to connect multiple devices. Now, you've got 6 pins, which means 6 devices. You're not limited to that. We aren't going to go into that. That is a whole other thing. It's not relevant to this tutorial. How is our pipe going on out here? Okay, we're going to head outside, I think, because I want to show you this phase change. Which we're going to hit relatively soon. Sorry, there's a lot of things going on. I'm aware, I'm sorry if I'm back on forwarding, but you know. Welcome to Stationeers. At least our power's all good. We're doing well on power. So we're currently 6 degrees out here, as you can see, but the temperature is coming down, which is a shame. You can see in there we've currently got 2.6 megapascal. If we go back and look at pollutant, why is my cap lock on, you asking? I don't know. At 6 degree, we're looking for a pressure at about 3.3 megapascal. We're not going to get that tonight. Let's turn that off. That will be a tomorrow job. That's a shame. But it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So, back to the greenhouse. Excuse me. Okay. So, the IC housing is used to automate devices. What we want to do is we want to read the pressure from the room. When the pressure in the room is below 50, let's go 52 kPa, we want that pump to turn on. That pump will pump CO2 out of this network into this network, which is just open to the greenhouse. And it will continue to do that until the pressure in here is 52 kPa. So, let me introduce you to MIPS coding. Now, again, this, if you've never done coding before, this might go over your head, and I do apologize. There are other ways of doing this. This is just how I would do it. But you can look online. There's bound to be a video out there somewhere of somebody telling you how else to do this. But this is, for me, is probably the simplest way of getting what I want done. So in MIPS, you have all these different lines of code up to 128 lines. It says 127, but it's because you've got a line 0. So you've got 128 lines of code. And in these lines of code, you tell it what you want it to do. Up here, you've got clear. So if I was to like write something in there and click clear, it would clear my code. If I was to write something in here and highlight it, I can copy, I can paste. Oh, it won't let me. I can copy there. I can just copy and paste just with Control C and Control V. Don't worry too much about those. Cancel takes me out. Confirm means basically save my changes and exit. You can go back into it and you can continue with your code. You've got a pause button here. That pauses the game. So the game behind this window is currently fixed. Nothing's changing out there. So this gives you time to think about what you're doing. In the top right hand corner, you've got a button that's for functions, and this gives you a long list of all the commands that you can run. There's loads in here. In all honesty, I'm not going to go through them all with you. I'm going to touch on a couple, and I'll tell you what they do as we do it. Otherwise, have a read through. Some of the descriptions are bogus. They don't help in the slightest. Others are actually really good. If you click on the X button, this is kind of a list of all the variables that you can use, kind of like all the different logic types. I don't really ever use this. If you ever need to know what you're writing to or from, press F1, search for your item, and then when you get the item, here's your logic, and that is everything that you can read and write from and to. And then SX, these are your slot variables. So this is stuff like if you're reading from a particular, how do I explain a slot variable? So basically, you can read from the crusher. So I could read whether it's on or off. Or I can read if it's currently processing something. Or the actual slot, I can read whatever's in that. So in theory, I could code this and say, if water ice is in there, turn on. If oxide is in there, or volatile is in there, or nitrice, turn off. And that is by loading from the slot. Again, not going into it, not what we're doing today. But that's just what that button is. And this button here just makes the window transparent, so you can see what's happening behind you. I hate this view. It actually really bothers me, so I don't have that on. And that's pretty much it. So now we're going to code. Okay, now again, I hope this isn't too much, and I'm sorry if it is, but I'm going to go through it as easy as I can. This is why I told you it's going to be a longer video. So, when you're coding any devices in here, you are communicating to those pins. So we will be telling this pin to do something. That pin will be connected to a device. So for example, if I did this and I search, there's gas sensor. Apparently we've got 2 gas sensors in here because one of them is in the greenhouse. So let me label this one. Greenhouse sensor, that will do. So I can connect there's the greenhouse sensor. So if it's on the left, so for example, now it's set to external greenhouse vent. If I click it, now it's set to greenhouse sensor. The box on the right, where it says cycle to, that's what it's going to change to if I click on that pin. And I'm clicking on the pin with my screwdriver. So I can click with my screwdriver to send forward, or I can hold C to cycle back through them. But yeah, when you're writing your code, you're basically telling that pin to do something. The code doesn't know what's on that pin. You're just telling the pin to do it. And then obviously the device gets to it is basically whatever's on that pin. If there's a problem, it'll error and it'll give you like a rough indication of where the error is, and you have to go down and track it down. But basically, all we're going to be doing is loading information from the pins, saving information to the pins. Pretty straightforward so far, I think, anyway. Now, your pins in the game are D0, D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. Okay, 6 pins. If there isn't a D6, you use D0, and so on. Now, when you're writing your code, you probably don't know what D3, D4, D5 is. It would be nice in your code to know, what am I reading from? What am I writing to? D1 doesn't mean anything to me. So we can do something called aliasing. So if you type alias, this basically, if you hover over your functions, it will give you an indication of what it does. Alias is used to give a pin a name. So I can alias, and let's go sensor as D0. So now in my code, I can either write to the pin, or I can write to the sensor, which in turn is also the pin. It's the same thing. I'm just giving D0 a name. So it's good practice to always alias your pins, and that way you know when you look back at your code what the hell it's doing. So I always start my code with aliasing at the top. Get yourself in a good state. So we're going to read from the sensor, and then we said depending on that sensor, we were going to turn the pump on. So because we're going to be reacting with the pump, we also need to connect that to a pin. And because we're going to connect it to a pin, we're going to alias it. So alias the pump to D1. And you know what? We're going to have more than one pump in this room eventually. So make sure you label your devices. The CO2 intake. Name it whatever the hell you want. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you understand, obviously, what it is and what it does. But in here, I'm going to call that CO2 intake. And that's my pump. And if you want to, you can also put notes. So if I put a hash here, this is the pump. I can also put a hash here, and I can have an entire line as a note. And that is good practice as well. Put notes next to your code so you know what it's doing. So here I could put this is the gas sensor inside the greenhouse. Yeah, and can I do that? So we've aliased the sensor, we've aliased the CO2 intake. We don't need to alias anything else right now. We're fine with this. So what I'm then going to want to do is I want to start my code. Now, we want this system to constantly be checking this greenhouse. It's not a one-time thing. It should always be doing it. Which means we need to put our code inside of a loop. Bear with me 2 seconds. Sorry about that. So, we need a loop that our code will go into. It'll run the code, and then it'll loop back to the start and run the code again. Loops are defined by a word, and then use the colon. And it will go purple, indicating this is the start of a loop. Now, somewhere at the bottom, you're going to want to loop. You're going to want to go back to start. So what I always do is a few lines down, I will put the letter J, and then start. However, over J, that means jump. When you're jumping inside your code, it just means go to a line. So whenever you see J, they're going somewhere. There are different types of jump. Again, not going into it. We're doing the bare essential. But basically, what's going to happen is when we run this code, it's going to alias the sensor, alias the intake. It's going to run down our code in order. When it gets to this line, it's going to jump back to here. It's going to jump back to here. And that is all that does. Any code inside of this section will be ran. So it will run it, jump to start, run it again. So now we need to determine what are we doing in here. So when you're thinking about code, think about the problem at hand. What is the first thing I want to do? Or what is the entire solution? We've already said, if the pressure in the room is below 52 kPa, we want to turn the pump on. So the first thing I want to do is I want to know what the pressure in the room is. Simple as that. And we're going to get that from the sensor. Press F1, search for sensor, and this is all the stuff that you can read from. And we said that we want pressure, which is right there. We can see that we can read. We can't write to the sensor. The sensor is for reading stuff. It's not for, you can't write, you can't tell the sensor to do something. All you can do is pull information from it. This is why these are all read. But we want to read the pressure of the room. So, how do we do that? So, the way you take information from a device is you load from that device. So you put the letter L. If I hover over that, it will say load device load type to register by housing index value. Doesn't make any sense. Or it doesn't if it's the first time you're looking into it. But basically what L does is it will load into a register from a device a logic type. Now, logic types we've been through. These are all your logic types. Devices we've been through. Obviously, we're aliasing them, but I could just put the pin in. But what is this? What is a register? A register is, well, the way I see it is a variable. Okay? These run all the way from R0. You can see that they're going blue. All the way to R15. You can actually put more in here, but R17 and R18 I don't think exist. It only goes to R15. I think anything above that won't work. Might be wrong. Maybe they've changed it. But my understanding is there's 16 registers. Register R all the way through to R15. What these are used for is to hold information. That's it. You can save to a register something. Let me just pause the game. So I can save to the, so I can load into that register. So pull something from the device and put it into the register. I can manipulate the register, so I can like do a calculation if I want to. I can add something to it. I can delete it. I can change it from a 1 to a 0, whatever. Or we can save that register, that value in that register to a device. But basically, these are just a way for you to store your information. This is how you handle whatever you're doing in your code. So, don't worry about the description. Look at this little bit grey writing. So the first thing we want is a register. Okay, so I'm going to put R0 in there. R0 is, it doesn't matter. I could put R15 in there. I could put R7 in there. It doesn't matter. I always start with R0. It's just a habit I've got into. There's no reason. Use whatever number you want. It's fine. The next thing I want is the device. So I want to load from the sensor. So I can either put D0 in there, or I could put sensor in there. Whoops, that's not how you spell sensor. Yeah, and you'll know that it's not an issue because it's going white. So we're going to load into the register from the sensor. And then here, what am I loading? What logic type is it? So remember, we're loading the pressure. So this is case sensitive. So capital P, pressure. And it goes orange. An important note. Like I said, the code does not know what these devices are. All the code's going to do is just save to that pin. So if I was loading from that sensor something that the sensor doesn't have on it, it would still go orange, like, oh, it's not a problem. For example, if I look at the sensor, it doesn't have an on setting. It's always on. But if I put on here, it goes orange. There's no error. What you'll find is if I click confirm, if I export this code, I'm just spamming it, you don't need to do that. We can see that on our chip we've got 152 bytes of data on there. I turn the housing on, you can see it's currently erroring, and it's saying that there's an issue at line 6. I'm going to turn it off. Make sure you always turn it off if it's not currently in use and you're going to be writing stuff to it. Line 6 is that one there. So it's erroring because on doesn't exist. But you only get the error when you've exported it to the housing. So just bear that in mind. If you're not sure what you should be doing, look in your F1. This is everything you've got available. So I know pressure is available, so it should be fine. So we are going to basically grab the pressure from the sensor and put it into R0. So R0 will hold a number. So it'll probably, if we were to load that now, we would get the number 7 because that's the pressure that we've got in the room. Next, okay, I've got my pressure, but I want to make sure that pump comes on if my pressure drops below 52 kPa. So we now need to check what that pressure is. You've got to really like bring it down to its most basic form. It's not just a case of me going, oh, now I've got it, I just send it to the pump. No, I've got to tell the code what to check. So if you put an S, and then you can do SLT, or you can do SGT, or you could do GTZ, or EZ. No. Greater or equal to Z. Yeah, there's loads. Okay. Again, this is where looking in here would probably help you. You go to all the way down to S. You will see down here, you've got SEQ. A register equals 1 if A is equal to B, otherwise 0. SEQZ. Register equals 1 if A is equal to 0, otherwise 0. SGE, register is 1 if A is greater than or equal to B. So the SGT and all that kind of stuff this is us checking what that number is. So I want to check, is the pressure in the room less than 52 kPa? If it is, I want to turn the pump on. So I need, if it's less than 52 kPa, I need that to be true. Yeah, yes, it is below 52. Okay, yes, turn the pump on. So I'm going to go SLT. If I hover over it, register equals 1 if A is less than B. So what you do is you save into a register and then you do your comparison here. Now you can reuse registers. So the first register is where I'm going to store the result. I'm going to put R0 back in there. And then A, if A is less than B. So if R0 is less than 52. That might be a little bit confusing, so let me change that to R1 and it makes a bit more sense. So we are loading into R0 from the sensor the pressure. We're then doing a check and we're going to store that into R1, and the check we're performing is R0 less than 52? Now I don't have to do this. I could do this if I wanted to and that would still work fine, because R0 here isn't changed until after it's done the check. So let's say the pressure here is 20. I've got a pressure of 20. I load that into R0 and then it's checking in R0 is 20 less than 52. Once it's done that check, it will then override R0. But just to make it easier, because my wife found it easier this way, we're going to use a new register. We're going to do it into R1. So whenever you do a comparison, so save less than, save greater than, the result, as you can see there, register equals 1. Otherwise 0. So that for true is 1, false is 0, on is 1, off is 0. That's called Boolean values. That is kind of how you write on and off states to code, or true or false states from to and from code. So we are going to, if the pressure was 20, then because that 20 is less than 52, we're going to get a 1. It's like, yes, it is less. If we had a pressure of 60, and then it did the check, it would be a no, so that would be a 0. So that is what we're holding in there. Before we go any further, obviously we're going to want to then use that figure to turn the pump on or off. Go into your Stationpedia, search for pump. And there's the volume pump that we're using. If you scroll down, we've obviously got the logic slots. And here we have an on setting. If I click on on, the current state of the device, 0 for off, 1 for on. So, and if we go back, the on is read and writable. So I can read whether it's on, or I can tell it to turn on. That's what the write part means. So 1 means on. So if I write a 1 to it, I'm going to turn that pump on. Which is why we did the set less than. Because we need this to come on when the pressure is below 52. So how do we write that figure, that number to the pump? We just do S, which means set. You hover over it, stores the register value to the logic type on device by housing index value. Again, don't worry about that. Long story short, you are going to save to the device type and then whatever this value is. So we're going to save to the CO2 intake. The on is R1. So read it backwards because it makes more sense. I've got a number 1. I'm going to write that to the on property of the CO2 intake. That's our pump. Yeah. If this was to go through and we're on 60, then that would be a 0, which means it comes down here and the on would be a 0. That can be a little bit confusing, I think. It's the on property, but writing the word on doesn't mean you're turning it on. You are writing to the on property. And on can be 1 or 0. 1 for turned on, 0 for turned off. Okay? If it's on and the pressure goes above 52, then this will go off. And then it's just looping back round and round and round, and it's constantly doing that check. So we are going to export that to our chip, but I'll just go through it one more time. We are giving our device or our pins names, so it makes a bit more sense. We created a loop so that our code will continue to keep running. We are loading into our register, into our variable, from the sensor, the pressure. We are then doing a check. So we are checking that R0 is less than 52, and we're putting the result of that into R1. So if it's less than 52, we get a 1. If it's greater than, we get a 0. And then we write that 1 or 0 to the on property of the CO2 intake. Hopefully that's making a bit of sense there. If it's your first time looking at code, I sincerely apologize for my explaining of it. I really hope it's making sense. Again, we could use circuits to do this, but we can put all this code into a single circuit and it do all this for us, plus more. Because don't forget, I've got all these lines of code I could use for other things later if I want to. But I'm going to confirm. I'm going to export. And I always spam it because just to make sure it's gone through. If I turn this on, it's going to error. It says unknown error at line 8. Not the most helpful. If we look at line 8, that's where we're trying to save to the CO intake. So you might be thinking, oh, what have I done wrong? What have I done wrong? But you probably haven't done anything wrong. What you've forgotten to do is set the pin. Because don't forget, the code doesn't know what the devices are. We have to tell it via the pins. You can see here in the yellow writing, it expects a sensor. We're giving it the greenhouse sensor. On D1, it expects the CO2 intake. It's got no device. Get your screwdriver and find your pump, whatever you've called it. Mine was called CO2 intake. What should happen? At the moment, you can see that our pump is off. Is it daylight outside? No, because I've had it poured on that. Never mind. So what should happen is because the pressure in here is 7 kPa, we are below 52, that pump should come on. Let's find out. There you go. Our pump has gone green. And you can see we've got little white particles. And if I get my tablet, we can now see out there, look, in here, that the pressure is going up. Now we have got pollutant in here. Bit annoying, but obviously until we've got that tank outside pressured, we're going to always get that, so we're going to have to clean that up. But as you can see here, we've now got a system that is automated. Because the temperature in that pipe is so low, 6 degrees, it's bringing the temperature of this greenhouse down as well, which is, it's also cooling. That's not a forever thing. That's not always going to do that. But yeah, this should get this greenhouse up to a pressure that we're happy with. But I want to go a step further. I don't want to have to keep going out there and turning that vent on. I want that vent to come on automatically when the temperature out there is above 5 degrees. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. But I also don't want to put too much pressure into the tank. I don't need 50 megapascal. So let's head back outside. We are going to label the vent and we're going to hook up our tank. So if we get to the tank, you'll notice that the tank has a logic port here, so we can read from the tank. So let's get that connected to our system. I'll bring it down here. So we know that this cable is for the excuse me, is for the greenhouse. Sorry, I've been talking too long. My throat is hurting. Okay, so the idea here will be that we load the pressure from that tank. If the pressure in the tank is too high, we won't turn the vent on. But also, we need to make sure that the temperature out here is a decent temperature. Look, at the moment, it's negative 46. I don't want that in my tank. That's too cold. So, how do we read the temperature? We do it exactly the same as we've done in the greenhouse. We use a sensor. Go back to your electronics printer. Get yourself another sensor. And this one will be outside. There we go. Okie dokie. So we're going to want the gas sensor. And we'll just put it out here. So we've got a sensor there, yes, but that's pointing inside, not outside. This one's obviously pointing outside, so this one will give us what we need in Mars atmosphere. So I'm going to hook this sensor up. And at this point, we've got 3 sensors on that network. We've got these 2 and one in the airlock. So this is why it's really important to label your devices. So the sensor, we'll call it external sensor. And the vent, we're going to call it collection vent. Okay? And again, the idea here is going to be, we check the temperature on Mars. If the temperature is above, we'll say 4 degrees. If it's above 4 degrees, turn the vent on. As long as, the pressure in the tank is not greater than, let's say, 5 megapascal. And that should do us. So let's go inside. We're going to go back to our IC housing. And we're going to write that code again. Well, we're going to write that code in general. So we can just continue to put more code inside this loop. Okay, it'll do this. And then we also wanted to do something else. Let me quickly explain ticks. So this code will run every tick. And a tick is about half a second, 0.5 seconds. So every half a second, it's going to run this code. Now, there may come times where you need to give it an extra bit of time. Some people will always give it an additional half a second just for it to have a breather. You can simulate that by doing a yield. And a yield will pause for 1 tick. which is around 0.5 seconds. Not perfect, but close enough. You can stack these, so I could do yield again. That will be 2 ticks, which is 1 second. I could go 4 yields, which is equivalent to 4 ticks, which is equivalent to 2 seconds. I can also do sleep. So if I do sleep 1, that will pause it for 1 second, which is 2 ticks. I could do this for 10 seconds, which is equivalent to 20 ticks. The reason I'm telling you this is because some people will always say at the start of your code, put a yield. Do this if you want to. It's fine. It's probably good practice. One thing I will say is you don't have to. For long, complex bits of code, you'll probably put multiple yields in there. For what we're doing here, in all honesty, I don't think you need a yield. But I think a lot of people will say, put a yield at the start. So we're just going to do it just to please the people. But if you forgot this, not the end of the world. So, what do we now want to do? So we want to first check that the pressure in the tank is below 5 megapascal. Then check the temperature outside is above 5 degrees Celsius. And then we want to turn the vent on if both of those first checks are fine. So outside we have a tank, a vent, and a sensor. So yep, we need to alias those. We're going to alias the tank to D2. We're going to alias the intake vent. Oh no, we'll call it collection vent to D3. We're going to alias the external sensor to D4. Obviously, I've got a sensor and I've got an external sensor. For me to understand this a bit better, I'm going to rename this sensor. So we're going to go inside. Inside. So my inside sensor is on D0. I should probably follow convention. So my internal sensor on D0. My external sensor is on D4. Okay? We've aliased those. So now what I need to do is I need to do additional checks down here. So the first thing we're going to do is what we did here. We're going to load the pressure from the tank. Same code. So we're going to load and we can reuse register. So now we're going to do that. I showed you up here where you don't have to. So we've got R0, then we've got R1. But if I wanted to, I could put R0 there and there. That would still be fine. But we'll keep that separate. But down here, we're going to reuse our registers. Just to show you both ways of doing it. So we're going to load into R0 from the tank the pressure. That is going to give us a number. And that number for pressure is always in kilopascals, kPa. So remember that 1,000 kilopascals would be 1 megapascal. The first check I want to do is I want to make sure that tank is less than 5 megapascal. Again, same code we've done here. We're going to do SLT. And I'm going to reuse the register, R0. And check that R0 is less than 5,000. Again, with pressure, you are working in kilopascals. So if the 5,000 would be 5 megapascal. Okay, that's the first check. The second check is we want to make sure that Mars is at a reasonable temperature. So this time we're going to load, and this time we are going to load into R1 because we've currently got R0 here and we need to keep that for now. So we'll move on to the next register. So load into R1 from the external sensor. And what do we want to load from the external sensor? Well, we said we want to make sure that the temperature is above 5 degrees Celsius. So we're going to do the temperature. It's gone orange, which is fine. And again, if we look for sensor in here, gas sensor, we can see that temperature is an option. That's why I'm doing that. When you are working with temperature, it is in kilopascals unless you convert it. Not sorry, let me start again. Not in kilopascals, Kelvin. So remember, if the temperature outside was 0, that would give me 273. If the temperature is 5 degrees, that will give me 278. Now you can either work with that or just convert it. And we're going to convert it because I like Celsius. I'm a big fan of Celsius. I understand it. So I want to basically do an equation, a calculation to convert that. And easy, all you do is when someone hands you a temperature in Kelvin, just deduct 273. So we're going to do a sub, and that stands for subtract. Okay, and it's going to be A minus B. So into R1 is where we're going to put the result, and we're going to do R1 minus 273. So let's say we get a 300 coming through. That would mean that it was 27 degrees, but we got the number 300. We subtract 273, and that would give us our 27. So now we know whatever we get is going to be in degrees Celsius. And now we can work with that because it makes a bit more sense. Now what I want to do, I want to make sure that that temperature is above 5 degrees Celsius. I don't want anything too cold. Yes, cooling is good. Some cool gas is going to help, but I don't want it too cold. I don't want negative temperatures. So what I'm going to do is SGT. Set greater than. And we're going to put this into R1. Again, we can keep reusing the same register. That's what we're doing. So the result goes into R1. And we're checking that R1 is greater than 5. So remember, even though we got it at, let's say it was 278, we have changed R1 to be that minus 273. So we can constantly work with Celsius now. So we are checking that R1, so this value, is greater than 5 after doing the subtraction. And that will either be a 1 or a 0. 1 for yes, it's greater than that, or a 0 for no, it's less than. So here we have two checks. We have the tank pressure as a check. We're making sure it's less than 5 megapascal. And here we have a temperature check, and we're making sure that it's greater than 5 degrees Celsius. Because I've got two checks, I need to combine them. Because you can't write to a device. I can't tell the device on as R0 and R1. You have to combine it. And it's combined with an AND function. So you just write the word AND. And what this does, and I'm not going to read that to you. Basically, AND means that the result will be a 1 if both figures passed to it are true. If any of them are false, or both of them are false, this will be false. So, if our pressure is less than 5 megapascal, but our temperature was less than 5, only one of those is correct. So this would be a no. This would be a false or a 0. If our pressure was greater than 5 megapascal, this would be a 0. And our temperature was less than 5, this would be a 0. They'd both be 0. So we'd get a 0. You only get a 1 if both this and this equate to 1. So as long as the pressure is less than 5 megapascal and the temperature is greater than 5, this will become a 1. So what we'll do, let's make that R0 because we're reusing, and we're going to combine R0 and R1 together. So R0 is our pressure, R1 is our temperature, and then we override the R0 register with just a 1 or a 0 based on this check. So by doing this, we basically lose the pressure that we read, because obviously that's just been overridden. We still have temperature in R1 if we needed it, but we're not going to need it, it's fine. If you were going to reuse the pressure later, and you wanted to keep the temperature for later, you could put this result into a separate register. So I could put it into R2 if I wanted to. Which means that later on I can go back to R0 and R1 because it still holds those original values. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to override R0 because I don't need it. But now I have a 1. I'm going to have to call it soon because I can barely breathe. So this AND will give me a 1 if both of them are true, or a 0 otherwise. All I need to do now is save that value to the vent. So we can save. We call it collection vent. The on as R0. And let's put all that together. So that's all one part of code, yeah? So we're loading the pressure, checking it's greater than 5 megapascal, loading the temperature, converting it to Celsius, checking it's greater than 5, combining both those checks together, putting that result into the vent. Easy peasy. Maybe easy peasy, I don't know. Maybe I'm talking too quick, I'm not sure. I apologize if I am. In my head, it's not too bad. Obviously, I've done this a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if I was confusing some people, and I'm really sorry if I am. I'm trying my best. Hopefully this makes some sense to you. And don't forget, as you're going through this, you could make some notes. So obviously that one's pretty self-explanatory, but you could note it and go, loading the pressure from the internal sensor. And then here, checking the pressure is below 52. It will be a 1 if it is. And then here we are just going... Uh-oh, let me pause that for a sec. And then here we are just saving... Excuse me. To the pump. 1... Oh no, on or off based on the above. And then here we're just loading pressure from the tank, but you get the idea. And then here I would obviously do subbing 273, which converts 2 degrees Celsius, but you get the idea, yeah? Just put notes in your code so that when you look back at it, it makes some sense. But in theory, I can click confirm and export. Yeah? Let's see if that's working. Look at our pressure, 40 kPa in here at the moment. But let's go outside. And let's see what we've got out there. So I currently have... It's currently 0 degrees. Unfortunately, the temperature is going down, so we've missed the daytime. But we know that our code is potentially working because that vent is not on. Because the temperature is below 5 degrees. So we'll have to come back out here and check it tomorrow. But I'm pretty confident that that's going to work. And you can see in there, we've obviously got a pressure of 2.29. So again, tomorrow, we should be able to get rid of that pollutant. Right. I wasn't going to call it here, but because of my throat and realised that I'm already an hour and 24 minutes in, I'm going to call it. We haven't got much done, but we have introduced you to IC coding. Oh, this is erroring. Line 14. Oh, because... Don't forget, line 14 is the tank, but it doesn't know what the tank is. So make sure you turn your code off if it's erroring, and then go through your pins. So we need the tank. I can't remember what. Oh yeah, tank small. D3. It wants the collection vent, and then D4. Excuse me, is the external sensor. There we go. I should probably now, because that was erroring, nothing would have fired. So let me go and check the vent outside. It should still be off. I'm pretty confident it will be. Yeah, there's no lights on, so that vent is not currently on. We'll come out tomorrow and we'll check that that is still the case. So yeah, so we haven't got much done today, but what we have managed to do is get a system, whoops, which is going to keep our greenhouse pressurized. Because look at the pressure in here. We're on 46 kPa. Now, this is a bit slow. Don't forget, I've got this set to the lowest. If I turn this up a little bit, we can increase the speed at which it pressurizes. So if I put that up to 5 litres, and just make sure that I've still got enough gas in the tank, which I think we definitely have. Yeah, we're going to be fine. So that pump should go off in a second. Any second. There you go, look. It's gone off. Because the room has got above 52. Now remember that the 52 is the sensor, and the sensor is reading from this cube. So if this cube was different, then you may get a slightly different reading. Because it's a small room, I can walk through the entire room and it's the same. Sometimes you will notice that this room, or sorry, this cube could be 50 kPa, and over here could say 60. Depending on the size of the room. Obviously a small room, not going to happen. But we know that code is working. We know we have now got a room that is pressurized to what we need. And you know what we could even do? If we have a look what's in here. We've got more CO2 than anything else. But let's play a little bit dairy, shall we? I want to be able to breathe in here without my suit. So I'm going to open this tank. Now, the setting on the tank... Sorry, I think I'm dying. So, the pressure on the tank is the pressure at which the room should be. So, no, it's not, sorry. The pressure that you put on here is the amount of pressure it's going to try and push out. If the pressure on that setting is less than the room, nothing is going out. Okay? I would have to, if I go to 50, still nothing. If I go to 51, still nothing. 52, still nothing. You see there, nothing's happening. If I go to 53, that should be releasing a bit of oxygen in here. You can see there, look, our oxygen is going up very slowly. But let's crank this up, shall we? Let's get up quite a lot. Let's go to 70. Now, obviously, the pressure in our tank is going to go down. But the pressure, or the amount of oxygen in the room is going to increase. Now, if you're playing as the human character, then you need about 20% oxygen in this room. So we're currently on 11. Let that build up just a little bit more. While we're waiting, let me grab some food. And some water. Right, what is that getting us to? We're on 15%, which is good. We're obviously starting to run low on pressure in there, but I'm not concerned. We'll get a system up and running to replenish that. 17%. Almost 18. So our pressure is quite high. Don't forget that this isn't going to be an issue because our potatoes can handle a pressure ideally between 50 and 100. I've got this set to 70, so we're not going to go above 70 in here. And when we get potatoes, they'll be more than happy with this. But look, I'm at 20% oxygen. So, head over to your helmet. Click unlock. And open it.
Oxygen low.
Now, I've got an oxygen low warning, but it's not critical. It should be because it's a little bit lower than your character would like. Excuse me. I can keep pumping a little bit more in. And it should eventually, that warning should disappear. Oh, I can't see. Let me just replace my suit light. But yeah, we are basically, there we go, it's gone. So I've hit a pressure of, I've hit a ratio of oxygen of 23.9. I can now drag my suit off if I want to. Look at that. We are now in our room without our suit on, and we are not dying. That is a step forward. 100%. Just a note as well, like your character, if you are standing, whoops, wrong way. If you're standing in a room of oxygen, as I breathe the oxygen, I will be exhaling CO2. So the amount of oxygen I have in here will slowly decrease. But at this point, we're going to be able to get loads of oxygen. It's not an issue. Take your suit off, and these two triangles, which you've probably had for a while, will now disappear soon, because these are causing you to use a bit more water than normal and a bit more food, I think. So just walk around in here with your suit off for a little bit, and they should disappear, and then your character will be very happy with you. Very happy indeed. But yeah, so that was basically what we wanted to do today. So we've done MIPS for the first time. We've obviously got an entire system built. We've got ventilation in here. We've got a space that we can run around almost but naked. Not quite. You want to get proper naked, take everything off your character. There we go. Now I'm almost naked. Yeah, not that kind of channel. Or is it? But yeah, so that is kind of part 2 done. There was more I wanted to get through, but I didn't realise that I'd be talking this slow to the point where it's lasted almost an hour and a half. Next time we are going to look at next time I think what we're going to do is probably look at the cooling aspect of it. Again, pretty easy. We'll use some MIPS for that again, so we'll do some more coding on there. And we will build our script to just run our greenhouse. It's bringing in the CO2, it's keeping that tank under pressured, and it will keep the room nice and cool for us and our plants. And there is something else we need to do to the greenhouse for the atmosphere, but we don't need to rush on that right now. That's absolutely fine. So hopefully this was of some help. I'm really sorry if the MIPS bit kind of bewildered you a little bit. Be honest, there's going to be aspects of the game which are a little bit challenging for you, but it's part of the game, it's part of the fun. Like, if you can get your head around this, even the basic concepts that we're doing now, it's going to completely change the game for you. It's going to make certain aspects of it so much easier. And down the line, when you've got your base like massive up and running, you could do some really nice, really complex automation to the point where your character could just stand here and your entire base is just working around you. And that's kind of the aim, really. So we'll leave it there. Next time we'll do some more MIPS and get some more progress on the greenhouse made. And yeah, we'll pick up from there. So until then, take care, and I will see you then. Oh, excuse me. Bye.